Everyone keeps saying that we're already at AGI. The models can code. They're passing these exams that we designed to test AI. They can be your therapist, your assistant, your intern, all at once. But then you ask one of these supposedly world-changing systems a basic question, a question that my 4-year-old daughter could answer. Something like, how many glasses are on that table over there? And it can't do it. Come closer. I'll tell you the dirty secret of the AI industry. The dirty secret of the AI industry. Every engineer knows this. Every software developer knows this intuitively, is that the hard part was never in the computer. It was in the physical world. It had to do with laying out warehouses, telling what wires are connected to other wires, telling, yes, how many glasses are on the table. It's physical. It's spatial. Only a very small subset of human problems can be represented in text, and AI is utterly failing at everything that is not text. Let me tell you what it can do, what it can't do, how adoption is actually going at enterprise companies, because that's something all these VCs and tech influencers never tell you because they have no fucking idea. I'll tell you how we got here and what the future is going to look like for these tools. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. These tools are genuinely world-changing. I can ask Claude to write a Kubernetes configuration that would have taken me a whole afternoon of trial and error. It can whip it up perfect, no syntax error in a couple of minutes. It also cannot evaluate my position in a board game. And I have experience with this. Let me tell you an interesting take on this. So one of my hobbies is chess. I'm an avid chess player, not very good, but I enjoy it. And I was trying to get better at chess. So I take the notation of my chess game that I played with a friend online on my phone. So it says where the pieces move. There's a chess notation for this. And I feed it into ChatGPT. I say, go ahead and analyze my game. Tell me some of the thematic weak points here. Where did this game go wrong for me? And where were some of the good moves that I made? Where were some of the good moves my opponent made that I didn't catch? And it goes through and analyzes the game. And it starts telling me stuff about when you move your queen on turn 4. And I'm thinking, I didn't bring my queen out until turn 10. It's quite late compared to what you're saying. And I've done this with a number of games over time, and it just cannot spatially reason about the board or where I've moved pieces, which is quite basic if you sit down with the chess notation to see, here's the piece that's being moved, here's the square that it's being moved to. It's a well-defined problem in text, and it can't do it because it involves spatial reasoning. And that's the real divide right now between what AI can and cannot do. It can do things brilliantly with text. It can analyze an earnings call. It can analyze tax filings, but it can't tell you if a wire is connected to another wire, and it can't tell you where you went wrong in your chess game. The embarrassing part isn't that an AI fails so hard at visual problems. They can be genuinely difficult, even for humans. The embarrassing part is that it fails at visual problems that my 4-year-old could quite competently and easily do by just looking. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. If you're a VC or Boris or one of these other talking heads for the AI labs gabbing on Twitter all the time, you only see the good stuff. You only see the valuation of the company go up. You see that we cranked out another version of Claude code that has another / command in it. And to be sure, that's no small achievement. But it was also the worst of times. I was director of software engineering at American Express during part of their AI rollout. I was responsible for increasing usage and adoption and use cases among all of my employees in my remit. And let me tell you, AI ain't eating the world in the enterprise the way that they want you and need you for their valuation to believe. When I was at American Express, the easy part for the engineers was writing code. The difficult part was getting another department to work with you, navigating a 12-and-a-half-hour time difference because they've offshored most of the company to India. It was explaining to executives, yeah, if you generate that press release with GPT 4.0, people are going to notice that you didn't write it and that it was written by an LLM. Understand, companies don't lack imagination or even innovation for how to use these technologies. It's stuck because most of the problems in most of the economy outside of that small San Francisco, Silicon Valley startup scene, VC box are not text problems. They're people problems. They're spatial problems. They're emotional problems. But the issue with defining AGI is that Everybody in the San Francisco VC class and working at these AI companies defines success by text-based metrics. Every time we see a new model come out, there's a system card, and the system card says how well the model performs on these different automated tasks. It assigns it a numerical score. A higher number is better. And it's the same problem if you're raising a kid by evaluating them based on their standardized test scores. It's like, that's great, but can they work in a team? Can they kick a ball? Can they interact with another human with empathy? Are they charismatic? These are things that are going to directly impact their potential and what they're able to do in their life, the types of fields they're going to be drawn to, and the type of business problems that they're going to solve one day in their career. Yes, the text problems are important. The test scores are important, but they're a very, very small piece of the puzzle. And people are forgetting this, and they've been forgetting it for a long time. So this is not AGI. This is not general intelligence for people like you and me that live in the real world. But for the San Francisco VC and AI employee class of folks, it is solving all of their problems. So it does look like general intelligence because all of their problems are text-based. You take somebody like Boris, the head of Claude Code, the mouthpiece of Anthropic for how great Claude Code is. All of his day-to-day problems are improving Claude Code, so he can use AI to mostly work on text problems with Claude Code. It's that simple. So for him, it might be AGI because that's the entire problem set he works on. But that's not the rest of the economy. They do not want you watching my content. The big tech companies do not want you to question the finances behind the AI bubble. They do not want you to question why they are sponsoring so many H-1B visa employees and not hiring American workers. Simply put, there are things that I cannot say on this platform that I would like to tell you. If you would like to know what those things are, please sign up for my weekly newsletter at newsletter.drjoshcsimmons.com. Again, that's newsletter.drjoshcsimmons.com. This is a theme you'll see through a lot of technology development over the years. You only need to understand one thing for this all to click for you. Then you're going to see it everywhere. This is one of my favorite maxims or laws. It's called Goodhart's law. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. This is the same paradox we find on a smaller and slower scale with standardized tests. That's why I mentioned them earlier. If the teachers teach to the test so that their students get a good test score, they're leaving other general intelligence on the table. Now, humans are humans. You pay attention in class, you don't pay attention in class. And to some degree, this is bad, but it's a self-solving problem, right? Because humans are gonna human. In tech, the iteration loop speeds up a lot. So you have these automated tests that they're optimizing for, and all that matters is that the last generation of model got a 90% on that test. So we need to score a 91% on the test. So you train the model to do better at the test. The tests may change, but at the end of the day, they are text-based tests. You might ask, why do they optimize for this then? I mean, surely these people can understand that that's going to give you a myopic type of tool. And I think they did, but it's easiest to train on those sorts of things. It's easy to train on a math problem because 2 + 2 will always be 4. It's easy to check. We have a way to check that. So we can train a model on it. If you need data sets for your model, the internet is text-based. How much text is there on the internet? Virtually unlimited corpuses of text that you can scrape, tokenize, and train models on. So to some degree, this was just easy to get started with these models by getting them to interact with text. But the physical world is much harder. And until I worked at a company that dealt with physical hardware, with sensors interfacing with the real messy and wild world, I had no idea how difficult of a problem this was, how horrifically difficult it was to quantify air movement, spatial motion into numbers that make sense into the computer. There is so much to account for. It is just a super imposing problem space. That's why it's so fun, by the way. And if you get the chance, if you're in tech, to ever work with physical hardware, you should certainly take the opportunity for at least a couple of years. It will develop you in a way that working in mere software will not. And you might ask, Dr. J, okay, so what's the deal? Compelling problem space with physical data. Surely you can get physical data sets. We have sensors out in the world. We can pull from Roomba. We can pull from all of the cameras that we're not supposed to have access to through Flock. We can pull all of that data and train models on it. And that'd be true. But the thing that you forget, and this is another reason working in robotics or working in physical hardware is super compelling and super interesting, and I highly recommend it, is the stakes are always much higher. If you get the wiring wrong in a data center, that could be a multi-million-dollar mistake. If you get full self-driving wrong in a Tesla, that could be lives lost. So if you're telling me that I have to make some kind of generational technology, I need people to get hyped about it, I want my career to succeed, I'm intrinsically motivated to do well in my AI development career, I'm not going to work on physical problems, because if I summarize an email 80% correct, people are going to use my tool constantly, and they are. If I get full self-driving 80% correct, I'm probably on trial for involuntary manslaughter at scale. So here's where I'm excited but bearish on development in the AGI space. For AI to achieve AGI, it's going to need to do a lot of additional things. It's going to need to reason about objects in space. It's going to need to understand human emotion. It will need to manipulate tools, real tools in the physical world. It will need to understand or imply cause and effect that's not obvious, which is even hard for humans sometimes. And since this is high stakes, it will also need to know when it's uncertain and how to handle for that, which again is something that humans struggle with. So today's AI is very strong in the abstract layer, very strong. There's no debating that at this point. I'm not going to debate that on the channel anymore. It's very strong at the abstract layer. But the physical grounded layer, pathetic, barely useful at this stage. And you'll notice this if you've used any of these tools for really any amount of time. I mean, how frustrating is it? I see this all the time. How frustrating is it that ChatGPT or Claude can write you these huge plans, extremely verbose plans, multi-step, here's how to do anything in the world that you want to do, but it can't actually do them for you. It could come up with maybe an architecture diagram for a house, partially, but it can't build the house. It could, this is a really disturbing use. A lot of people are using it for performance reviews for their employees, but you didn't work with the employee. You're a model. How do you know about the emotions with that person? How do you know about their story? How do you have that ineffable sense of what they're good at and what they're not good at, other than what the metrics say? Understand, real intelligence is knowing ahead of time whether your answer will survive contact with the physical world in every dimension. The story we will see wind down and fall out of vogue over the next 6 months is AI employees. That term will become meaningless if it's not already. And the new holy grail of AI is going to be what we would consider as software engineers, or very flawed people maybe in the VC space, as humble work. Can it do inspection, maintenance? Can it create wiring diagrams? How is it at CAD? And I'm not saying some crappy demo where, hey, look, it designed this one gear in CAD and it works. I'm saying it needs to understand risk, because remember, like I said, once this comes into contact with the physical world, that's where you really need to know, am I certain of this answer? And what are the implications if I don't get it right? And then how do I handle that? AI is obviously not fake, but what I hope to drive home to you today is that it is woefully uneven. Uneven is the term I've been searching for months now. It is extremely uneven. Great in the abstract. When it comes to grounded real world knowledge, it is not good. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. These models are very useful, but they are not gods. So the next time somebody says that AGI is already here, ask them one question. Can it only see the world, or can it take action in the world yet? And until the latter is true, we have not achieved AGI.